share in the chat where you're calling from and just share your name and maybe where you're located, so we know how many people are here from different cities. And if you have, just to remind folks that as you all are listening to the webinar, if you have questions, please try to use the Q&A feature to ask your questions, because it's just easier for us to follow along with the Q&A more than we can follow along in the chat. But we will be using the chat to send links and resources, especially towards the end. So if you can stay towards the end, we do have some action items and resources that we want to share with everybody here. So yeah, as folks are joining, please drop your name and your location, where you're calling in from, share with us in the chat, and we'll get started pretty soon. Welcome everyone. As people are joining, please drop your name and where you're located in the chat. It's really helpful to see people calling in from different places. And we'll get started in about a minute or so. All right, we're gonna start in very soon. So just to, again, please share your name in the chat where you're calling in from. And yeah, welcome to our webinar today. We're gonna be talking about 77 years of the ongoing Nakba and ongoing resistance. And we're gathering here again today, not just to commemorate the Nakba, but to also learn about lessons from, organizers in our movement, from our movement's history, that we need to take now, following 19 months of genocide, and thinking about how do we continue to confront Zionism. Just to be clear, he is removed. This is an anti-oppressive space, so any Zionism, Islamophobia, racism, sexism, this will not be tolerated and will result in an automatic removal from the event. So we do have chat moderators that are doing that. So we are going to be following that throughout these events, through all of our events that we hold. Again, this is an anti-oppressive space, so any expression of Zionism, racism is going to result in a removal. And we also want you all to be able to connect with each other, but again, just be mindful of the size of the event and try to use the chat to respond to prompts and questions. If you want to talk to a specific participant, you can message them directly in the chat. And if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature because that'll again allow us to track the questions easier. So just to begin, we understand that, one of the main strategies of the Zionist project is to sever, Palestinians from our homeland and from our struggle for national liberation. And another primary strategy is to, propagandize, develop propaganda to be able to try to convince the world that the Zionist project is justified. But, for the past 19 months, Gaza pushed us into a new era where Zionism and US imperialism have been exposed, where the true nature of Zionism has been revealed as a fundamentally genocidal one. And also for the past 19 months, we've been mobilizing and organizing and, organizing disruptions. And, we've had people, we've seen people, block, shut down highways and bridges and block the flow of boats filled with weapons that are being used against our people in Gaza. We've seen this all around the world. And some of you here may have been part of this struggle for many, many years. And then some of you may have joined this struggle or been brought into the Palestine movement in the last year or so. And we know that this is not an easy road, and it requires our discipline and our commitment and also our sacrifice. So we're here today, marking 77 years of Nakba, to also make a recommitment to the Palestinian struggle, because we know that a commitment to the Palestinian struggle and organizing against Zionism also means organizing against, U.S. imperialism and colonialism and the oppression that actually shapes so many of our lives. The Palestinian people have resisted the Zionist, entity for over 100 years. And throughout this period, there have been historic revolutions. There was the Great Arab Revolution of 1936, where the Palestinian popular classes shook the British imperialists to their core. We've seen the popular revolution launched in the camps of Lebanon and Jordan that completely transformed our people's understanding of what it means to be a part of a national liberation struggle. We've seen the first and second intifadas that reaffirmed the need for popular organization and the centrality of our occupied land in our struggle after decades of being relegated to, as a secondary front. So with each phase that we've seen and with each revolution that the Palestinian nation has waged, we saw the importance of the mobilization of our people, of our allies, of the organization of all sectors of society, and the building of experience from each of these phases. For the last 19 months, we've seen this unrelenting genocide waged against our people and have woken up each day to news of more death and destruction and famine, man-made famine. But we also know that amidst the daily war crimes at the hands of the US-backed Zionist genocide of our people in Palestine, we've also seen a struggle for over 100 years that has been marked by unrelenting popular resistance. Again, Gaza has pushed the world into an era where Palestine is unavoidable and where people have been really exposed to the oppression that conditions their daily lives, right? So this year we're doing this webinar as part of an international week of action, commemorating the 77th year of the ongoing Nakba, knowing that for the past 2 months or so, the Zionist entity has imposed a complete siege on Gaza, barring any entrance of food, water, or medicine. And this is all happening on the heels of Israel's formal ratification of a plan to attempt to fully and permanently occupy Gaza. And we're seeing this also happen around the time of Trump's visit to the region, which is expected to produce contracts and agreements that will accelerate the ethnic cleansing of Gaza through forced resettlement projects, potentially new normalization efforts, and so on. And this is a moment of reckoning for all of us to really recommit to this struggle, and for all people around the world to really make it clear what side we are on, to make it clear that we stand against genocide, and to also think about for ourselves, what are we going to offer in service of liberation? Like, what commitments are we making here today? So again, for today, we're going to be talking about, we have 2 speakers, I think, they're both on, talking about the attacks on, how are the attacks on our people in Palestine directly connected to the US government's repression and attempts to kind of break the growth of our movement here in the US. We're going to talk about lessons we can learn from the history of Palestinian organizing, and we're also going to talk about ways to take action, including the demand for an arms embargo and how how organized pressure works and why organizing is key to the success of our movement. So I'm going to start with Monadil, who is an educator, a community leader, founder of and president of the Arab American Union Members Council, and is a higher education professional. And I'm going to pass it to him to share a little bit about himself as well, and to also maybe open us up by talking to us about how, sometimes people kind of feel like they're not seeing immediate results from their actions, or those of, there's many people who've been brought into the Palestine movement in the past, year and a half. And as someone who's been involved in the struggle for many years, if you can speak to us just about why it's important for us to really think about the struggle in the long term and make that commitment, and how that kind of relates to how our people have been struggling for over 100 years against Zionism and imperialism, and just talking to us about the long term and any lessons you can share with us. So I'll pass it to you, Manaldil, and we'll go from there. And again, if you all have questions, please use the Q&A chat feature. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Celine. Thank you for hosting this significant part of the discussion that we're doing as we commemorate the Nakba. I can't believe it's been 77 years. And, I've been, I have, witnessed the up and downs. I mean, the liberation movement of Palestine, just like any other liberation movement, we all go like the ups and downs, and go in advance. But what is significant about the liberation movement of Palestine is the nature of its enemy. The nature of its enemy, the settler colonial project of Israel, who wants to exterminate the identity of the Palestinians, uproot them from their land. That makes it essential for us to recognize that each and every period of time, we have a new generations that take the torch and then continue the fight. In 1967, when the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza after the Nakba, almost 20 years after the Nakba, it was really it was devastating for the Palestinians. I recall my relatives and my people who are like in the refugee camps. In the eve of 1967, they did not have any expectation that the result is going to be occupying the rest of Palestine. But they were like, imagine that they were in the tents trying to prepare their luggage to go back to Palestine. They had no clue that it's going to be a defeat. It's going to be an occupation of imagine how the moral and the demoralization that took place in 1967. So in that moment, a few years later, we witnessed the birth of the revolutions, the rebirth of the armed struggle, and the Palestine Liberation Organizations that taken up arms. And not only that, but gaining a lot of support around the world, to the point that when 1975, the whole world agree on a resolution of making sure that Zionism is a form of racism. That what happened in 1975. And then it was really important that we recognize that. After that, we also, there was up and down. And then I remember when I was a student in 1982, it was like the evacuation, or like the forcing the Palestinian armed forces to leave Lebanon in 1982. And it was also a devastating time. It was really horrible for us to see that taking place. Nevertheless, I mean, also, I want to really important that the moment that the Palestinian revolutions left the camps, we have witnessed a massacre of Sabra and Shatila. They don't have any arms, so that gives us an indication of why the Palestinian revolutions and all Palestinian people cannot and will not give up arms against this vicious and fascist enemy that we have, they will wait to the moment to eliminate our existence as a people. And soon after that, in 1982, after all this downward movement, there was like almost in November of 1987, there was a quote unquote Arab summit. It was held in Amman, and the Palestinian issue was hardly mentioned. So it was really, people were demoralized. People think, oh, Palestine has been forgotten. Nobody's talking about Palestine, even in the Arab summit. That was when? That was November of 1987. Much to their surprise, in 1987, in the end of 1987, we see the birth of an intifada, a new phenomena, something that the whole world is witnessing, the Palestinians unarmed, chasing the armed tanks with stones, with sticks, with everything that they have. And that was another moment where we Palestinians have gained a lot of solidarity, and the solidarity movement has become much stronger then. It's very similar to that. In 1992, there was like also they're starting to promote the Oslo Agreement, and something to crush the Intifada, crush the first Intifada. A few years later, much to their surprise, we see the second intifada in 2000, and people take arms and then start working on resisting the occupation. And that I think the darkest period of the Palestinian time was really after the signing of the Oslo Agreement. Signing the Oslo Agreement has been like very devastating for our institutions, for the unions, for the organizations, for all this that has really happened then. And then we see another, after I don't want to take much of your time, but I wanted to see how I want to take this what happened in October 7th from a historical perspective. And it's really as we all see the phoenix bird symbolizes the immortality and resurrections and life after death. It's like an ancient Greek and Egyptian methodology, but it really makes me feel that really if people, it is just make the Palestinians much stronger once they are away from like this direct threat. We see another generations takes up the arm, takes up the struggle for justice. And I feel that we cannot let Palestine solidarity falter right now, and will not let the demoralizations lead us. But rather, it makes it clear in the contrast that we see today. We see today that Trump in the Middle East being hosted by the royalty, by the dictators, by the richest of the rich, having luxurious and dinner and food and all this sick. When we see this, and the same time at the second screen, we see children starving to death, literally starving to death. So the whole world is seeing this contrast, and then we see ourselves that we have to continue build coalition to fight back against the Trump agenda. We cannot let Palestine to be marginalized ever again. We cannot go back to those days where the coalition refused to take a stand against the Israeli occupation. So and I think we are in a moment that we could really build on the solidarity, build on the thousands of people in the streets, not only in the United States, but all over the world. And also, we recall that we're very connected to the liberation movement around the world. And as I mentioned earlier, in Haiti in 1804, there was like, they're all surrounding Haiti. And it was really, it is a revolution of the slaves then. And there was like the French colonizations were surrounding Haiti, and they said, Napoleon then said, it's why it's just a small island. And then we're talking about like Gaza is a small geographic area. Why is that? Because they don't want to make sure that none of the slaves around the world can stand up and fight against us. So for us, Gaza is really representing a spirit that is really fighting this impression, this horrible situation that we are in. And we see the people around the world uniting to get justice for the Palestinians. I will stop here. Is that okay, Celine?
Yeah, no, that you're actually really good on time. I mean, thank you, Manal. This is true. Like that Gaza has also kind of reignited, anti-imperialist movements and revolutions all over the world, because the oppression is one, like the system of imperialism is the same around the world. So I wanted to ask you actually one more thing, because you spoke about this with Trump's visit to the region. This is something that I think is important for all of us to actually struggle against, even on the level of like our own, schools or workplaces, and that is normalization. Can you talk to us a little bit about like why is normalization actually so dangerous for the Palestinian struggle? Like whether it's the normalization on the level of, for example, Saudi Arabia with Israel, or even on the level of an institution that some of you might work for, maybe having a relationship with like a Zionist organization. Why is this actually really dangerous for the movement and our struggle. And yeah, just wanted to see if you could respond to that.
Thanks for this question. I think this is really important. The terminology that we use is really important. Paying attention to that normalization, it's really, we have to think about the fact that they want to force you to normalize with racism, to make it acceptable, to make it's okay. It's a normal thing. But we see that contrast is like, the government of the United States are really allying themselves with the dictators in the region, and wanted to normalize with the settler colonial state of Israel. Having said that, I think if you see, I mean, this is we pay attention to some sort of disagreement or illusions of disagreement between the Israelis government and the U.S., and I think it's important to point in that the fact that it is, if we see that the U.S. started to talk about the new Middle East since 2006, but they were unable to do that, and now they see the time is ripe enough to really redraw the Middle East in the geopolitical sense, where they can get a hold of the resources of the Middle East and resources of that region. The only difference, and I see that it is what type of new Middle East we're talking about. It's an Israeli new Middle East, Benjamin Netanyahu's Middle East, or Trump Middle East. This is how bad this is. It's a very gloomy, but it shows also that there is no voice for the people. It shows that the dictators are the one who is pushing for some sort of a normalization with this kind of a reality that they want to enforce it on us. And it's time for us to, I think it is time for us, for the new generation, to realize that who are the enemies that we face. We face the triangle enemies of the Zionist movement, of the imperialist power, and the reactionary Arab regimes. They are in the same camp, and then that will give me a chance to hope that the people and the masses in the Arab world will not continue to do that, as we see, like people, the port workers in Tunisia and in Morocco, and these people, although the numbers are still limited, but I see a really good signal, this spark that will continue to grow.
Thank you so much for this. I think this is, like Manal said, really important for us all to understand that normalization is, it's normalizing genocide, normalizing the Zionist project. And even like on a concrete level, it means establishing, on a diplomatic level, establishing cooperation, economic agreements, trade deals. It means security and military cooperation. It means cultural and academic exchange to further cement this propaganda that, Zionism should be normalized and justified. And it's also like part of the strategy to actually quell popular and mass resistance to Zionism from the Arab masses. This is also part of the reason that normalization is so dangerous to the movement in general, and it completely also helps to strengthen these reactionary Arab regimes that Manal is talking about. And like you said, this is the era where Netanyahu is pushing for the new Middle East, or Greater Israel, which has always been part of the Zionist project's goals. They never officially declared their borders because the Zionist project is an expansionist project, and it wants to continue to expand even beyond the lands of Palestine, which means this is a struggle for all people who are oppressed, all people who are in the region. And there's actually like a really good course happening right now called Understanding Zionism through the People's Forum and PYM in New York, where they're actually getting into the details of how we can better understand Zionism. Just one final question for you, Manal. Can you talk to us, just given that you're also in the labor movement, you also have a history in the GUPS, like, what do you feel is different about this moment? And can you share with us a little bit about what the maybe like the General Union for the General Trade, the PGFTU, Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions, and just like historic actions that we've seen other unions take in this moment that we actually haven't seen before. Maybe it would be good to also share with the audience just some things that maybe they can look into. We saw something recently from Norway. We've seen actions, like historic actions in Belgium, like all these things. Just wanted to see if you could speak just a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Celine. The PGFTU, which is the Palestinian General Federation Trade Unions in Gaza, have we been in contact with us in terms of like the actions. And I remember the first one we had was in 2009 and 2014 during the attack, during the war against Gaza by the Israel. We need to recognize the fact that this is not the first war against Gaza, the people of Gaza, by the Israelis. This is the fifth time that they attack us. My own cousin has died in 2009. He was only 22 years old, and the current genocide right now, 3 of his brothers died as well. So it shows how devastating this is. But in 2009, the Labor Federation of Palestinians in Gaza sent us a call to really do whatever it takes to stop, to make it sure that we need to stop this war. And I remember that then we started to organize with our brothers and sisters and the port workers, ILWU Local 10 in in Oakland, and we were able to prevent the Zim ship from loading in Oakland port. I thought that was very important struggle, very important indication that we could do that. We did the same thing in 2014, and we did the same thing in 2021. And I think this type of allies between community and labor unions and rank and file union members, really important to show the solidarity and to show similar struggles that the same allies between community and unions to stop the injustice of these regimes. And it was an example for the ILWU. He said, yes, you're going to do the same thing that we did against the regime of South Africa. And this is the right thing. So militant mean actions to boycott and then stop this. I thought this is really important. And one thing that I wanted to also highlight is the fact that we, in the labor unions, as just like any other fields, in academia, in students, in labor, we see the effects of the Zionist elements in there. So it's really important that we be active in our own unions, be active, each and every one of us who is a union member, whether teacher, health care workers, any type of academia. We need to be a voice inside our unions to really expose those Zionist elements that are saying, to support genocide. There is no union member can really support genocide or pay their investment in their pension to support a state like the State of Israel.
Thank you so much, Manaldil. And we shared in the chat also the most recent statement from the PGFTU. If you all want to read that, it was sent on the eve of May Day this year. Thank you again so much, Manaldil, for speaking to us. I know we could probably talk to you for a couple hours, given all the lessons you have to share with us. And so, please everyone give a thank you to Manaldil for in the chat. And just want to also talk to Leah here, who's an organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement based in Boston, also with the Mask Off Maersk campaign. Just wanted to talk to you kind of a little bit in relation to what Manaldil talked about around like the ups and downs that our movement faces. We're in a period right now of a lot of repression, and it's also been, it can be, paralyzing, it can be demoralizing, but just wanted to get your thoughts on how we should be understanding the attacks on the Palestine movement and the solidarity movement in the US in relation to the ongoing genocide in Palestine, and like how should we be thinking about confronting it?
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks Celine and Yossi for having me. It's hard to follow up with Nadal. It's great to meet you, and you have so much incredible insight into the trajectory of our struggle and recent history. And I think it's really important that we hear from that when we're talking about this current moment, because I think, especially for many of us who are like, the post-Oslo generation, a lot of what we're experiencing can feel new. And I think it's quite important for us to remember that both, even in the trajectory of struggle in the US, but especially in the diaspora struggle and solidarity struggle for Palestinian liberation, a lot of what we're seeing is maybe escalations of, or like returning of, similar patterns that our people have faced and struggled against. And so we have a lot of lessons to learn from how we've moved in the past in order to understand how to move now. In terms of understanding the repression and attacks on the movement in this current moment, I mean, to state the obvious broadly, like these attacks, I think, can be understood as part of the power struggle between the ruling class and the oppressed on many different arenas. So in the region, like in Palestine and the Middle East, we understand that the attacks on our people and the attacks on our region in general are part of a broader imperial project. And imperialism in our region, in the Arab lands, has been enacted, at least for the last century, through Zionism, among other things, which is why normalization has been so damning to the struggle. But I bring it up to say that I think the logic of repression in our region is like, it's a similar logic in the US, in that, like, our enemies really know only the language of violence and collective punishment, and they use that to enact like class struggle and class warfare, or warfare against the oppressed people. So in the US, I think the attacks on the movement are part of, maybe, in addition to Zionism, fascism, capitalist dystopia, white supremacy, settler colonialism in the US. And I think those the champions of each of those, monstrous ideologies have like aligned and sometimes competing interests, and we're seeing that play out in the way that repression has taken shape in the US. So specifically, my day job is being a lawyer, so I look a lot at like the repression landscape from a legal perspective, and I think the lawfare that we're seeing on people right now, so the attacks on the movement, the way students are being hit, the deportation machine in general, attacking both the Palestine Solidarity Movement and all of our immigrant community members. I see this as playing out essentially a mix of, it's a logic of collective punishment writ large, and the way that is enacted is through a mix of precise targeting of either high visibility or like high impact targets in the movement. So we think about Mahmoud Khalil, Mohsen Modawi, Rumeysa Ozturk, people who, for different reasons, right, like each I think were targeted for different reasons, but had a mass ripple and chilling effect on the movement, targeting both people who were very active leaders of the struggle, like Mahmoud Khalil, and people who had relatively minimal, visible contact with the Palestine Solidarity Movement, but who had still just stood by their strong principles of being anti-genocide, like Rumeysa Ozturk, and targeting a few of those people in a really public way, I think, had in some ways the intended effect, or at least was intended to send a broader, like, chilling ripple effect across the movement. But actually, I think what we're seeing play out is that there's mass deportations obviously happening. They were happening under Biden. They've escalated under Trump in a I think more unabashed way. But when it comes to the deportations of people in the movement, we're not actually seeing them happen on a mass scale. And I think that this actually indicates to us the logic of the Trump administration, which is that they want to crush our movement. The Zionist, factions of the US government want the anti-Zionist movement. They see it as a threat, and they should see it as a threat, because our movement has enacted, material victory against the ruling class in the US, and it has sharpened, the consciousness of a lot of people in this country to understand both the Democrats and Republicans as being part of a broader project of Zionism and class warfare. And so it is a threat, and because of that, I think the administration wants to quell it. But I actually think that what we can learn from what's happening on the ground, at least in the legal arena, is that they don't actually have the political capital to wholesale remove everyone who has been a part of the movement, because when we're organized, we can exact higher political costs on the administration for doing that. That isn't to say that So instead, what we've seen is they're turning on vulnerable members of our community, among, undocumented folks in the U.S., people who have been accused of crimes, who are immigrants. Those are the people who are really getting targeted the most in terms of deportation, because Trump has made the calculus that it is less politically costly to deport those people, even though they have, just as much a right to be here living their lives in this country as any of us. And I think that speaks to the importance of organizing against this, is that this logic of like collective punishment is really only as valuable as we make it for our enemies. And so like one concrete example of this beyond the deportations we're seeing now that I think is like a microcosm of this is the like doxing campaign. So we saw mass doxing campaigns, and we're still seeing doxing campaigns, particularly in like the university context, but throughout the anti-Zionist struggle. And I think, I'll just say for the campus I was organizing on last year, when the first wave of doxing hit, I think a lot of people had the instinct to take a step back from the movement. It had a chilling effect. People were afraid to publicly go to Palestine protests, afraid to post on social media for like a minute. There was like a brief minute in there where I feel like people were like, there was a chilling effect of all of this doxing. And then people got organized and realized that actually, if we are all taking the same stand against Zionism, against genocide, and we're all coming out into the streets and we're all signing, the petitions to divest, and we're all participating in direct action, whatever the case may be, we're all joining the movement and taking that stand. Our enemies don't actually have the political capital to enact violence on everybody. And so our strength actually comes from our numbers, not from, trying to isolate ourselves from the movement. And I think that we're learning that same lesson when it comes to the mechanisms of repression that Trump is using, is that collective punishment only works if we let it. And the best anecdote to it is collective resistance. So being able to, take a united stand against what we're seeing. I think I have seen concretely this play out again and again, to like support those that are organized. And it's just concretely easier to support and care for people who are facing repression when they're organized and tapped into community networks. We saw the students who had, CVIS revocations, those who were part of organizing networks. It was a lot easier to get them very quick support to fight those revocations. And ultimately, a lot of them had their CVIS records reinstated. It was easier to support those who were tapped into organization, who were involved in organizing on campus, because they knew who to look for and who to turn for support. And I think time and again we've seen that distancing yourself from the movement is not going to save you. Zionists are never going to love us. Like imperialists are never going to love us. The ruling class is not going to love us. And so ultimately, like, we have to look to one another for support. And that's truly our strongest weapon. And I think that also makes sense in like putting that in conversation with what Manalda was talking earlier. Like if you look at Palestinian history, I think, for example, the post-Oslo period was like, I think in some ways you can understand it as like a retrenchment of class consciousness in Palestinian society, where a lot of people were sort of aspiring to like a normalizing class or a higher class. And because of that, the mass line organizing that we had seen in the Intifadas had lost some of its political power. And that didn't ultimately work in improving the conditions of the Palestinian people, as we see playing out today and throughout the last 2+ decades in the West Bank and Gaza, throughout historic Palestine. So I guess all of that is to say that our enemies have class consciousness at some level, so we need to as well. But that doesn't mean that there aren't fissures in what we're facing. Like I said, that I think the Trump administration knows that it doesn't have the political capital to enact the kind of, wholesale repression that they have on some folks in the movement against everyone. And so it's our job to increase the cost of political repression by increasing, public outcry and public resistance to what's happening. And I think we're also seeing cracks in the empire, the armor of empire. And so at the same time that it can feel really scary and we're in this heightened moment of repression, it's also a moment where I think the hens are coming like back to roost, or whatever that expression is, for Trump and his, benefactors. So I think this is actually really the time for us to get organized, because we have to be in order to exploit those cracks in the armor.
Thank you so much, Leah. Like, I think this is really helpful, like a good way to understand what we're facing, and that actually the isolation and the chilling effect is the goal of this repression. It's not so much about like putting it's about making examples of people. It's about like this theater to be able to try to like really crush the growth of this movement, and that's happening because our movement has been effective. Like you said, the only reason this is happening is because we've been able to make gains, and one of the biggest gains that we've made is the mass shift in public opinion that can't actually be retracted at this point, and that's actually resulted in the Zionist entity trying to put in $150 million more into propaganda efforts than usual, because all propaganda efforts, especially over the last several months, have completely failed. And that's a result of the efforts of the Palestine movement, the Palestine Solidarity Movement. So my next question for you is then, what should be the focus of our organizing in this moment? Like, there's a couple questions about like, are we organizing around BDS? We've also seen, some gains recently made around the call for, an arms embargo. If you can talk to us about, like how can we organize for that? And any examples of, recent wins maybe that our movement has had around these demands or gains.
Yeah, I think so I feel like in general, there can be an instinct in moments of heightened repression, or when it feels like the political landscape, especially in the US, is less favorable. Like, I think a lot of times we've sort of asked these questions, what leverage do we have over a Republican administration versus a Democratic one, which Zionist as they may be, at least their base is a little bit less Zionist. And I think in those moments where it feels like the political landscape might be less friendly, I've seen in some political instinct to like regress or retract our demands in kind. But I think that that's a misstep. I think it's really important now to be showing people why it is that we organize, and to make sure that our demands are bold enough to like be like presenting to people a vision that they want to be a part of. And when in terms of like what that actually translates to in terms of demands for the movement, I think an arms embargo needs to be really top among that list. I think what we've seen, and it's been said many times before, but a ceasefire without an arms embargo has just led to more genocide. And so we have to be getting really precise about what is enabling the Zionist entity to enact a genocide on our people, what is enabling imperialists to continue having an iron grip on our region and peoples throughout the world. And so I think with that, like, to take a step back, I guess, the reason people organize, the like why of organizing, is our principles of anti-racism, of anti-Zionism, anti-imperialism, of anti-heteropatriarchy. These principles that drive us to want and yearn for a better world. That's the why we organize. But I think it's important that we don't mistake that for what we're organizing over. We're organizing over power, which is enacted through land and resources and control over the global supply chain in many ways. So I think like it's important for us to politicize and organize people over the why, but to make sure that what we're organizing around and for is like the mechanisms of power. So the way that we have translated this into a campaign in the PYM is taking up the People's Arms Embargo, and specifically the Mask Off Mayors campaign. And that's because, we've had to do like quite a lot of research into shippings and logistics, and like understanding global supply chains, and truly just understanding how capitalism works at a more granular level than at least I was familiar with it before. And I realized that through doing that, like that's actually sharpening us to understand our enemy and understand why it is that that they have power over us, because we know we have the masses of people of consciousness. It's important, to get people politically on the same page. But at the end of the day, the masses of people around the world are people of conscience who don't want their tax dollars to be supporting genocide, who don't want Israel to be committing genocide on our people, who believe in this like vision of a free, dignified future. And the only reason that is not what's being enacted is because the few have power over the many through these mechanisms like, capitalism and imperialism. And so when we actually understand what that is, it breaks down into like the way that weapons flow from the US to Israel. Like a lot of the great work that folks in USCPR are doing, it's like, how are politicians, actually like making this possible? And, if we want to break down the arms embargo into like tangibly the power that is being used to enact violence on Palestinians, we have to look at like how the weapons are actually getting there. And I think we have to be comfortable with being very direct in our campaigns and like be sharp enough in our understanding of what's happening to confront that head on. So that's what we've tried to do with the Maersk campaign. We've identified the company that has shipped, has participated in hundreds of millions of dollars of contracts with the weapons manufacturers you've all probably heard about, so the Lockheed Martins and Elbit Systems of the world, and they, have contracts with the U.S. government through, among other things, the Maritime Securities Program, which basically contracts Maersk vessels to send military cargo from the U.S. to Israel. And so by understanding exactly how this operates and choosing one company in particular for our campaign, we're able to like break down sort of the monstrosity of imperial dominance into something like concrete and measurable that we can fight against. And so we've done, we've had some pretty significant successes in, it's been about a year since we launched the campaign. And in that time, we've exposed the role of a port in Spain of, trafficking a lot of the military cargo, despite the fact that Spain had an arms embargo. They had rejected Maersk ships when we published that information back in the fall. And even more recently, we identified F-35. So those are the fighter jets that drop the bombs raining down on Gaza as we speak. F-35, there's an F-35 sort of program that many NATO countries are a part of. And we had identified some parts of F-35s that were traveling from a Lockheed Martin facility in Texas through, across the east coast of the US, over the Atlantic, and then through Europe, Morocco, the Mediterranean, and then eventually to the Zionist entity. And so by identifying this like specific shipment, these exact ships and where, where they're going, how the transfers of what exact parts of this fighter jet are being, put on what ship and when, we were able to like distill, the monstrosity of the genocide into one really particular thing that we can do something about. And so we confronted those ships in Norfolk, Virginia, in New Jersey, then, comrades that in Europe confronted them, including dock workers in France that refused to dock the ship that was then traveling to pick up the F-35 component parts. And I think most notably, we saw massive success in Morocco, where Moroccan people and port workers took to the streets en masse for the day leading up to and days around the Maersk ships coming to dock and transfer the F-35 parts to another ship to then take to the entity. We saw many workers flat out walk off the job and refuse to be a part of shipping genocide. And so that delayed the Maersk ship many hours. I can't remember the exact number of hours that the ship was delayed, but these delays are quite costly to Maersk. And we saw that between the delays in France and Morocco, they've had to actually change their business calculus. They're no longer using the French port that they had stopped in before and had faced resistance from French dock workers. So we're seeing that mass resistance, especially organized labor and organized workers, when they take stands of consciousness, it's actually forcing the hand of these imperial, benefactors and war profiteers. We also saw a similar thing happen in the update in the fall when Spain rejected Maersk ships, and then Maersk had to sort of, stop relying on that port as much. And so, even though at the end of the day, all of this organizing is not able to stop the genocide and end the bombs, raining down on Gaza, I think it's really important that as a movement, we're shifting our demands and the way that we organize to really be over the terrain of the mechanisms of power. And so that's why arms embargo is so important to me, why targeting corporations really particularly is super important. and that we're doing it in a way that is changing the calculus of our enemies, whether that's the US or Zionist government, whether that's the corporations that are cashing in on genocide. I really think that we need to start measuring our success as a movement and into the calculus of like what change have we enacted on our enemies? Like how have we forced them to recalculate or up the political cost of what it is that they're doing, such that this war profiteering is no longer going to be as profitable for them. All of these people listen to is their bottom line, so we have to start hitting them there. But yeah, so I think that campaigns that are really organizing people over the mechanisms of power that control their lives are ultimately how we get organized towards liberation. And we have to sometimes get really specific about it, and maybe that means learning how like intricate supply chains work, or maybe it means understanding how decisions are made in your workplace, how your union can get organized. Like, I think there's a lot of similar paths to understanding like how to pull the levers of power that we actually have control over. And I think for the Palestine movement, it really needs to come through the lens of arms embargo.
Thank you so much, Leah. I think this was really great around like why an arms embargo is effective and how we can organize for a people's arms embargo. And I think just to tie it back to what Manalda spoke about regarding normalization, for example, what we saw in Morocco was, yes, a protest against, a corporation, against the shipping of weapons components, that would be then used in the genocide. But it also was an opportunity for the Moroccan people, for Moroccan workers to take a position actually against their own government's normalization with Israel. So like how these things tie into each other, why going after these really specific corporations and being more centralized and more concrete in our targets is actually going to be really effective for us in the long run, because we can go after a million things at once, but if we can really focus on, really clear targets, one by one, and really affect their bottom line, like, that's the thing that's going to get us the wins. I think we have, like, I'm going to try to like combine a little bit of the questions, but maybe we'll just kind of turn it into like maybe like a closing comment real quick. Plus also, I think there's just generally a question about like how we can expose the activities of like the Zionist lobby, but maybe just we can broaden it out. Sorry, I don't know why I'm losing my voice, but we can broaden the question, maybe ask about like, how can we continue to expose Zionism, expose the activities of Zionist institutions and these corporations, and maybe just any, any closing comments that you guys would like to share with the audience, and then we'll move into like resources and next steps. So I don't know, Manalda or Leah, if you want to speak to that really briefly.
Closing statement, do you see? Oh, well, I am really honored and really proud to be part of this program. And I think right now, it was mentioned earlier that we are up against a huge propaganda. Billions of dollars that are trying to create a propaganda against our plight. But the fact is that these propaganda are starting to be getting outdated. All this stay away from Palestine is a complicated issue, anti-Semitic and all these kind of things. And I think we are in the right track, and we want to talk to our friends and supporters who are listening to us right now that you are in the right side. Meaning that it is fabricated narrative against authentic narrative. People are Palestinian. I mean, I'm very, very, very proud to hear like from Leah, from people for the new generations that are like born and raised in the United States, born and raised in Latin America, born and raised in Europe, born and raised everywhere, but they are Palestinians. There is no way they can eliminate this. And the fact that a new generation will really learn more ways and sophisticated ways that they are able to confront this fake artificial entity. Maybe probably that's why they are trying to be successful in using artificial intelligence, but it's an artificial entity. They have no other way but to do that, even though they're messing up everything. So I think it is, we are very confident. We are very proud. We are very proud of all our supporters and all our people in solidarity with the Palestinians, because they're in solidarity with themselves, with their interest against all these, injustice that's taking place every day in our different fields, in our schools, in our universities, in everywhere. And I think we're going through a tough time, but we will win at the end. And I really appreciate everybody who's supporting Palestine. Tomorrow is going to be big marches in the weekend about May 15th. And we are not only commemorating Nakba and occupation, but also celebrating the continuation of resistance in every form. In every form there is, and everywhere that we have people who are working for liberation, working for freedom and justice.
Thank you so much, Monaldil. I don't know, Lee, if you want to say just a few words about how we can continue to confront Zionism, or just any closing remarks from you, and then we can go to the actions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not going to be as inspiring as Manal, but I see that a lot of the questions are to the effect of like, how do I get started? Like, I see a couple people have different arms manufacturers in their city. They want to launch a campaign against them. I would say for people who are thinking about how to launch a campaign, how to get started in a protest, obviously, if there's a group locally that you can join in and join forces with, I think that's super important. But even if there isn't, I mean, I would say, we had a campaign here in Boston called Elbit Out of Cambridge that successfully evicted Elbit Systems from they had an innovation center in Central Square in Cambridge. And that was successful because, it started at the very basic building blocks of researching what is this facility, who works there, who runs it, what do they do? If it's a warehouse, what do they produce? Who runs it? What clubs are they in? Just doing a lot of actually very specific research, even though it might feel less powerful or exciting as taking to the streets. I think it is super important to be very well researched in our campaigns and then translate that into flyers, speeches at protests, teach-ins, materials that you can use to engage your community on what's happening at this particular location. So what we did is we canvassed people all around that area. We'd knock on doors, hand them flyers, go to local businesses, put flyers there. And then that started to create enough buzz about it that when we announced a picket, people actually showed up. And then we could do that every week. And then even just those persistent pickets and some direct actions were what eventually got them to leave. And so I think similarly with the mayor's campaign, we're seeing that research is super important. Public education is really important. And then that translate into tactics and methods like protest and direct action that can really force out our enemies. So I would say start small, get well researched, talk to your neighbors, get organized with people or organizations or groups that have common interests with you. And those are basically the building blocks of revolution.
Yes.
Thank you both so much. If everyone can stand for just 3 more minutes, we're just going to go through some actions, but shout out to the speakers. Thank you so much for joining us. And as one of our local organizers, Ron from Unión del Barrio, always says at every speech he gives, if you're not in an organization, join one. That's really the best way to get started. Join one, make one. Just to go through a few resources, we just want to share with you all, we have a city council organizing toolkit. So if you're interested in taking up a campaign in your city, we have a toolkit that outlines different options for you to get started, and also questions to ask yourself before you launch a campaign on a city level, whether it's divestment, or whatever it is you're trying to pursue. And there's some divestment tips in here. We can go to the next slide. We also have let me drop the links again in the chat so y'all can see them. Please copy paste. You can use these links, and we'll also send a follow-up email. But we also do have a People's Arms Embargo toolkit that just, again, has some tips on thinking about how to determine your target, or what tactics can you use, or how to assess movability of a corporation if you want to go after a corporation. And there's just some examples from previous campaigns taking on different corporations here. Don't worry if you're not able to copy paste, we will send these in a follow-up. We can go to the next slide. We also do have the want to encourage everyone to take action. We wanted to do this now, but if folks can just take this link, uscpract.org/Gaza call. Please share this to your network, share this widely to people. This is a demand for Congress to let aid in and stop the the man-made famine, stop the, the siege. So this is just like a way to pressure your reps. So if you, I would call and send an email. I would do both if you can. So just please take time to do that if possible within the next, few hours, few days. And again, share this link widely to everyone you know. And then I think there's two more things we'd like to share with you all. We do have the People's Conference for Palestine coming up August 29th to the 31st in Detroit, Michigan. We encourage you all to register. This will be a space where you can come and meet people all across the solidarity movement and across the Palestine movement, where you can sharpen your skills and learn from different campaigns, learn from different experiences. We really encourage everyone to register. And again, also share this to your friends, your family, your organizations. And the theme is Gaza is our compass, because it really has been, and it's a space for us to gather and sharpen our analysis, our skills, and think about like what's next for us, what's the next phase of our organizing here. And then I think there's one more thing. I think we have our military funding map, I believe, and tax dollar. Oh, actually, we have, again, this has been part of an International Week of Action. There's going to be many mobilizations throughout the week. Please join one near you. These are the Nakba Day actions, and I think a lot of them are happening this Saturday. And I know this is a lot, but basically we have conference, week of action this week around Nakba Day, a tool to pressure Congress to let the aid in, and toolkits for your campaigns getting started. And we also just have another resource. If you go onto the USCPR's Not My Tax Dollars website, you can find a military funding map where you can learn about how much money in your city goes to, to Israel, and just like a bunch of materials for you to utilize that for, flyering, wheat pasting for your own local campaigns. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. I don't know if there's something I missed, but I think that's, oh, and then lastly, there's going to be a global BDS anti-Chevron day of action on May 21st. So again, we'll send this all in the follow-up, but there, if you are taking on a Chevron campaign or want to just join an action around this on May 21st, we have a way for you all to find an action near you on the Global Day of Action, May 21st, on this link. So there's a lot of information. I totally understand that, but a lot of it is just resources that you can hold on and use whenever is needed. I think the main call to action really is the Let Aid In Congress tool. Everything else, please utilize these resources, register for the conference, and here's the full list. And yeah, we'll close here. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one, and hopefully in the streets this weekend for the Nakba Day mobilizations.